I'm Sarah Gutterman, CEO of Green Builder Media, and I have the privilege of being here today with my friend Ken LaRoe, who is founder and CEO of Climate First Bank Corp. So Ken, you have pioneered the integration of environmental sustainability into the banking sector. And your journey from establishing traditional banks to launching Climate First Bank, a full-service community bank with a mission to combat the climate crisis, offers a wealth of insights into values-based banking and sustainable finance. So first, tell us about your transition and your journey from traditional banking to founding Climate First Bank with an environmental mission.
I started my first bank in '99, and it was a standard Florida start it, scale it, exit it, investors get their payday and go on. And it worked, and it was a really nice return. The timing was perfect because we sold in '06 and didn't have the meltdown to go through. And then after we sold, I had a non-compete, so I couldn't go back into banking for a period of time. My wife and I got a mini motorhome and we circumnavigated the country. And before we left, my brother gave me Yvon Chouinard's autobiography, Let My People Go Surfing. And as many of the listeners will know, he's the guy that started Patagonia clothing. And I read the book on that trip, and I actually got it finished in the first couple of weeks. It was like, oh my God, this is it. This is what I got to do. I want to do something with the rest of my life that doesn't just make a bunch of people a bunch of money, but gives back. And making a bunch of people a bunch of money along the way is a really nice benefit. So that was the genesis of First Green Bank. And we filed the charter application, make sure I get the dates right, in 2008. And or maybe it was the end of 2007, and it took forever to get approved because that was right at the meltdown. The regulators were freaking out. They weren't granting any charters. And on December 22nd, 2008, they granted us the last charter granted in the state of Florida for 9 years. And it was the last granted in the U.S. for, I think, 5 years. So it was a very rare piece of paper, and I've got it hanging on the wall right over there in the corner of my office. But it was an exceptional time to be starting a bank because of the meltdown, and all the banks were hemorrhaging and under pressure, regulatory pressure and loan portfolio pressure. But so it allowed us on the business side to really prosper, and then put emphasis on the value side, which we didn't really know what that meant, right? So we knew we wanted to do something environmental, and the bedrock product we thought would be consumer solar lending to help people put solar on their homes. So we started developing the product, and that's a really long story and a really long progression. And it took iteration after iteration after iteration. The whole time we're trying to figure out, well, what does it mean to be a values-based bank, which is now a thing. It wasn't really a thing back then. And of course, ESG didn't even enter the common vernacular till 2018, about the time we sold. So we were dancing on the pinhead of what is social when we didn't know that was the term that was going to evolve. What is environmental? We didn't know what the term was. Of course, governance is like, why aren't you running a company with good governance? So that one's always confused me. What's the problem? Why does that have to even be called out? But that was kind of the evolution. And then the really big, probably turning point or inflection was being asked to attend the annual conference of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values in 2012. And that's an international NGO that started in 2009, ironically, the same time we started. And that really helped me understand what it meant to be a values-based financial institution.
So tell us a little bit more about values-based banking. What does it mean, and how does it distinguish a bank like Climate First Bank from conventional financial institutions?
it's still, in my opinion, evolving. It has kind of turned into a term of art, and it's certainly something the Global Alliance for Banking on Values hangs their hat on, and they have really robust vetting to allow a financial institution into the organization. But it's not all environmental, it's not all social. Maybe kind of compare it to the B Labs structure for vetting a company to become a B Corp. But there are plenty of financial institutions in the Alliance that are very social centered, whether it's financial inclusion, racial financial equity, all of that stuff, to a bank like us that's very centered on environmental issues. We don't neglect the other, but we may not be pouring as much resources into the other. But as an example, what just put me on my ear back in 2012 was I was sitting at a table in a breakout, like at a round table, and there were CEOs from around the world at the table in different financial institutions, totally different structures and all that. And the CEO of Brock Bank in Bangladesh was at that table, and this was back in 2012. I don't remember what their total asset size was, but it was pretty big. They were doing 8,000 microloans a month. They had 8,000 lenders who rode bicycles into villages weekly and collect the loan payments and extend new loans. That institution just about single-handedly is bringing that country out of abject poverty. They have like the largest egg farm in the country. They had 400 schools. It was just, and I went away going, oh my God, I'm not worthy to even be sitting here, with this amazing work. And then fast forward to the U.S. and the growth in the U.S. of membership into the organization, and you've got exceptional banks like Southern Bank in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is a CDFI, totally focused on the abject poverty of the Mississippi Delta, one of the poorest areas in the world, honestly, and certainly probably the poorest area in the U.S. But that's all ticking the S boxes, pretty much. It's not ticking the E boxes. So to me, it really means a financial institution that's focused on doing good as well as financial viability.
I'm sure you have bumped up against a tremendous amount of skepticism over the last 2 decades as you've been doing this work. Talk about how you've been able to navigate and overcome this skepticism as you've established these 2 sustainable values-based banks now, and especially in light of changing political landscapes and climate right now, where climate action is not prioritized. How are you maintaining your commitment to your mission and your advocacy to environmental and social practices?
Well, it certainly has changed. When we started First Green Bank, and I remember a conversation I had with one of our shareholders who was a shareholder at my first bank. Remember, just a plain vanilla, start it, scale it, sell it, make a bunch of money. He made a bunch of money. He invested a whole bunch in my first bank. So I went to him to invest in the second bank, and he said, Ken, I'm in. Sign me up for $700,000. And it's like, whoa, yeah, this is going to work. And he said, but I got to tell you, that green stuff, that's all a bunch of bullshit, but it is the best marketing I've ever seen. And it's like, okay, hand me your check and let me go. So that was even before the bank was open. I was getting that level of feedback, but it wasn't offensive and it wasn't in your face. And it was people that were maybe very conservative, but I still feel are good people. This stuff today is off the rails. It's completely off the rails, and it started for us with the election of Ron DeSantis as governor. So it started for us a long time ago, and the foolishness, and we're a Florida state chartered bank, so we are directly impacted by the laws of the state of Florida. And when they started the whole culture war thing, it like I said, it's off the rails. So how do we navigate it? We just keep our head down and keep doing the right thing. We're not going to deviate from doing the right thing. I've got 734 shareholders who I'm very beholden to. They're almost all a friend at this point. If they weren't a friend when they invested, they become a friend. And I'm going to certainly take care of them, but I'm certainly going to take care of all the stakeholders, not the least of which is Mother Earth.
Now, that's a nice dovetail into my next question for you, which is looking at some of the specific things that Climate First Bank is doing right now. I know that you've made significant strides in financing solar installations across multiple states. So can you talk a little bit about the impact of those initiatives and the bank's plans for expanding renewable energy financing and other sustainability project financing?
So, the initiative for consumer solar, I didn't have anything to do with it because I don't know anything about ones and zeros and or qubits or anything else, but our CTO wrote all our proprietary code for our product, and that is critical in this space because all of the deals are installer driven. So the installer wants their sales rep to sit down at the dinner table, present their pitch, and be able to walk out with a contract. The only way to walk out with a contract is either cash or finance. So that product that we developed way back at First Green Bank in 2009 and kept tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, right about the time we sold the bank, the fintech industry figured it out and said, oh my God, we can take that and digitize it, give instant, a 3-minute application, instant credit decisioning. And they blew up right at the time we sold. So when we started this bank, the objective was, well, we've got to have that product, and we've got to put the predatory fintech lenders out of business because they are bad. They charge undisclosed dealer fees, which have hit as high as 52%. And so the installer passes that on to the consumer undisclosed. So they're paying twice as much, or 50% more for their solar array. So we built that product in May of 2022. By January, by the end of that year, we were at 10 million a month in production, and we weren't allowed to go out of the state of Florida. So all the loans were in the state of Florida. Effective June 1st of last year, we came out of what's called the de novo period, which is a banking period of heightened scrutiny with a new charter, and we were allowed to lend nationwide. So we've rolled out nationwide. We're now in 45 states. It looks like this month, a third of our business is going to be Florida. All the rest is going to be elsewhere. We're getting a huge amount of volume out of California, even with their changes in the law. We're getting a bunch out of Texas, Arizona, ironically enough, and then up in the Northeast, the New York area. We've got some really cool partnerships up there. So we have put solar, we have financed solar on the roofs of 3,700 homes in America since May of 2022. So, in 3 years, and it's building the whole time. It's like a geometric progression. So that's just so exciting. That's just residential. Now we've also done about 80 million in commercial, which can be everything from the gal who puts solar on the roof of her dental office, or it could be the guy that owns a bowling alley, or it could be a community solar array in New York. And we've done a number of those. We've done a number of large-scale battery energy storage systems, which is a really cool thing. And my people are subject matter experts in solar renewable stuff. So we kind of started becoming the go-to source for the whole industry. It's really exciting.
Now, looking ahead, what are your aspirations for Climate First Bank, and how do you envision its role in addressing the climate crisis through financial services?
Well, what comes to mind with that question is what we're calling our 10-10-10 plan, and that's to be $10 billion in 10 years, and our stock value be 10 times what the shareholders originally paid. We crossed $1 billion about 3 weeks ago, and that's 10 years from 2022 is when we put the plan together. So by 2032, we're going to be $10 billion. Our stock value is going to be $100 a share. And that's financial metrics, right? So it's like, okay, that's great. The shareholders are going to be happy, but how does that play into the values piece? And it's really, in my mind, overly simplistic. Maybe I shouldn't oversimplify it, but at $10 billion, we're impacting a lot of lives. We have tens of thousands of customers at that point. It's just a way bigger platform to preach the gospel. And our shtick, if you will, is to influence and educate. It's not just to provide that solar loan, but to teach someone why they need solar and why it makes a difference. And there's another body of knowledge which you're very familiar with, and it's being developed very rapidly. And there's a nonprofit called Topo Finance. Paul Moynester is the guy that started it. He's done deep research into what moving your banking business from a traditional bank, I'm not going to call them names or call them evil or anything, but from a traditional bank to a values-based bank, and what how it impacts decarbonization. And it's amazing. It's huge. It's like you move $100,000 from a traditional bank to a values-based bank. It's equivalent to something like 80 cross-country flights. It's just huge. And that is becoming more and more common knowledge. And when it does, people that care are going to vote with their pocketbook. And at $10 billion, we got a lot of voters.
And my last question, any tips, tricks, or hacks that you'd like to share with our audience in terms of what they need to be looking for with respect to the banks that they engage with and utilize for personal and professional reasons?
I think if a consumer is interested, it's probably a minute and a half worth of research. Go to find out if a bank is B Lab certified as a B Corp. Find out if they're a benefits corporation, which I think there's 32 states in the country that now have legal benefits corporation status. Find out if they're a member of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. That's really the big three, but mostly the GABV, Global Alliance for Banking on Values, and be a B Corp certified bank.